Thanks for joining us. Let's stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
President Daly?
Here.
Vice President Headland?
Here.
Trustee Clements?
Here.
Trustee McNall?
Here.
Trustee Parr?
Here. Thanks for joining us. The next Board of Education meeting will be held on January 5th, 7 p.m. right here in the small gym. And it will be a business meeting, and it will be our first meeting in 2021. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Benante to introduce Ms. Barbera.
Thank you, Ms. Daly. As you know, 2 years ago, we began to contract for additional support in curriculum and instruction leadership through Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, and we've been fortunate to have Judy Barbera with us now for her second year with us. It seems like forever now, Judy, especially after this year. But Judy has been working very closely with our building administrators and our district curriculum council, which was reformulated 2 years ago, and focusing on a few key priority areas, not only just in our work as a district, but as it relates to our strategic coherence plan. So Judy's going to provide this year's curriculum update tonight, and with a specific area of focus around the work as it relates to curriculum that's embedded in our strategic coherence planning document. So with that, Judy, I'll turn it over to you, and I'm just going to kind of take a reseat over there next to Peggy on the end so there's no obstruction to the view on the screen here. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Dr. Benante, and good evening, board members. It's lovely to see you again. Yeah, last year I would never have said that this would be where I would be again this year, but I'm very happy, honored actually, to remain as a partner for the Haldane school community. And I did want to tell you that, well, first of all, I'm going to be presenting the Haldane Curriculum Report. However, I will let you know that what I will present will be absolutely the collective efforts of, first of all, the Haldane leadership team. I'm so glad they're all here this evening. So our administrators, district and building level, as well as a number of faculty members from all three buildings. Okay, so I'm the single voice tonight. We decided that's not my style. My style is a little bit more of collaborative presentation. You'll do this part, I'll do that part. But given all of the circumstances and the daily management needs going on right now, we decided, no, Jude, why don't you do this piece, okay? So in thinking about how to put together the presentation, I decided that I would structure it with two parts. The first part is really setting context, making sure that we are all thinking about some of our recurring concepts, and also connecting to some themes that I've heard from my lovely year and a half here in Haldane, in particular at some of your recent board meetings. So you should know that I'm there listening in. I really do appreciate the live feed stream that's now available. I generally have a cup of tea with me, but we'll pass on that tonight. So with thinking about it in two sections, it's only about 12 slides long, hopefully about 10, 15 minutes. But what I would like to suggest is certainly you can go ahead and ask any questions for clarification, especially if there's something that's not making sense to you as we go along. But I'll also pause after the first part of the presentation, give you everyone a chance to process, and again, ask questions, and of course, we'll continue the conversation at the end. That first section again, right? Context, recurring concepts, as well as some themes. So that's how we're going to get started. And even though the title is the Haldane Curriculum Report, in all of my years in district leadership, I never really settled just on that one term of curriculum, because of course this is really all about student learning. And the curriculum is clearly, right, the what it is we want kids to walk out of our system with. But how we measure that, right, and make good instructional decisions around curriculum implementation, otherwise called assessment, is another base of our triangle. And then, of course, the delivery, actually how students learn, how they engage within the curriculum and the assessment practices is part of the tip of the triangle, the instruction. So you saw that diagram last year, and I just wanted to, again, just reinforce that it isn't really what you'll hear tonight isn't limited to curriculum only. It's really around student learning. And we also have had some opportunity to expand the learning. It's always been expanded, but to be a little bit more intentional around the adult learning as well. So you will also hear some work around professional learning, sometimes called professional development, sometimes called staff development, kind of all means the same thing. And then the last piece of context up there is that all of this is still within the context of the current environment and all of the challenges that it presents. So a couple of concepts, these are the recurring concepts because you're going to hear them many times through the presentation this evening. There are two of them, the Haldane Strategic Coherence Plan and the Haldane Curriculum Council. With regard to the Coherence Plan, I have to say that it was, who remembers the date, March 13th, 15th? What was that, Friday? When we were really ready to launch that strategic coherence plan with the full faculty, but instead we had to spend time thinking about, wait a minute, how do we do this distance learning thing, right? So it has been kind of on a back burner. I want to say it's really more been on a side burner for a while, but we were able to, with some very, very careful thinking and planning around this, do a little bit of a relaunch. I think Phil called it a kind of a soft launch on Superintendent's Conference Day this year. So it is really back, I think, in a way that faculty are very much aware. They have a poster in their classroom around the strategic coherence, planning, mission, belief, the vision, as well as one of the most significant pieces of work that came out of that whole process, the 6 Haldane Essentials. As I reflected on, again, that whole process and go back over the plan from time to time, yes, I do that. The plan itself is pretty lengthy, but really the length is because it's very descriptive in terms of the way that all happened. You really can kind of boil it down to the one-pager. The outcomes were, number one, the Haldane Essentials, but then number two, the strategies, the high leverage strategies, there are 5 of them, right, that really will enable this system to move, to do that shift from really good to phenomenal. Okay, so that's the one piece, and in all of the work we've been doing, I keep going back to that document because I think it really can ground us and keep us focused on something that was designed by a large group of community members, right? Not just people who work in our schools on a daily basis, but also the broader community through that thought exchange. And so I think it really has a significant amount of information that really can guide the leadership and the implementation of the plan. The second concept up there that you'll hear a number of times, and Dr. Benante mentioned it, is the concept of our curriculum council. So this is a group that reestablished purpose last year. I think you may remember, well, I remember presenting it to you and saying, we really took some time in the very beginning to say, yeah, why should we have this group meet on a regular basis? And the purpose statement is there for just to remind you. They also did a really, really strong job of defining the norms or the expectations, how we would function as a team, both within our regular meetings as well as outside of the meetings. So I think there was some really, really fine work started. That curriculum council had to kind of really do the major pivot last March, when all of a sudden the work that what we were engaged in we had to shift a little bit and say, no, this is now about continuity of learning within a distance learning environment. So it's a wonderful structure from my perspective. Not only the council itself, which really has a total of 19 members, your 6 instructional administrators, as well as 13 of your designated titled teacher leaders, but it also has connection to all of the schools in that each of the schools has their own instructional council with additional staff members involved. So again, the plan anchoring what it is, what the goals are, and then the council, which is a significant means for helping to accomplish those goals. I'm going to catch up to myself here. I have my glasses on. Nobody's used to seeing me in glasses, but it's a little bit further away. Okay, so now the last part of this first part of the presentation is a couple of themes. There's the first one. Sound familiar? I think that was just at your last meeting. Dr. Benante said, come on, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. I know, yeah, I've heard that before. That's Stephen Covey. And so again, within the current situation, so important to keep the work, yes, meaningful, but also manageable. And one way that we can do that is, of course, to maintain not a singular focus so much as just a sharp focus on the work that we are trying to accomplish. So that's our first theme. The second one, I think, is a couple of slides from now. It is. So what is the main thing? The main thing are the Haldane Essentials, right? Again, strategic plan, really strong process, documentation of a strong process, but what comes out of it? What everyone decided they really value, the valued outcomes for the students here in Haldane. The slide that you're looking at is actually an excerpt. It's a piece from the posters that are hanging in all of the classrooms now. Has the mission and beliefs and vision, all of that as well. But then this is the one part of the poster that I think is just it's a recurring kind of message to everyone that, yep, this is what teaching and learning, what can center us here in Haldane. I have to say, as a kind of an outsider, I don't know if you could have done a better job with this. Every time I talk to colleagues in other places, I have to tell you, I brag about this. I say, just listen to this. You're going to be able to tell me critical thinking, problem solving, communication. Look at the other 3 valued outcomes within this plan. And it is, I believe, cutting edge. I think it's of the highest quality. And part of the conversation that we had is, with such a strong start in the planning process, if we don't get to it at all this year, it's almost like you're going to have to start another plan. And I kept going, no. This was really strong work. Okay, so that again is a way of saying, yes, we need to keep it meaningful, but we also need to keep it manageable. Here is the focus. Something that came to mind the other night when I was again going through this was, it's a very finite list, isn't it? It's only got 6 things on it. But I just think about the potential for really infinite impact, right? That isn't just for your high school seniors, right? Those are lifelong kind of skills and dispositions that we all value. Okay, so the council, right? That was strategic plan. This is the council. This year again, given everything that's going on, we decided we really needed to modify the process. Last year, the group met monthly, and we decided that that probably wasn't in best interest this year. So instead, what we're doing is we're meeting as a full council quarterly, but we've also taken the council and divided it into 3 strategic coherence planning strategy subgroups. That's a lot of words, right? So into 3 smaller teams. Each of the administrators is partnered with another, and 2 of us are then meeting with a much smaller group. It's probably about 5 or 6 of our teacher leaders, with a little bit more of a singular focus within those groups. That said, the members of the leadership team are still meeting monthly, and the reason for that is just because what we don't want to do is start having this feel like silos, right? You really want to make sure that you're ensuring and managing the rich connections that any good framework will have. And I believe that we've met twice already. I think we've met twice already this year for the full group. We're going to meet again in January, and then probably a couple of times in the spring. So that's how we decided to modify the process. And to be honest with you, again, we're learning a lot. This might be a better process than we had last year. So this is the last piece of the first part. That's another quote that I think may be familiar to you. And I think this is where we really get into the sophistication of the work that's going on here in Haldane. It's complex, but it's also really quite sophisticated. Building systems within a professional culture like the one here in Haldane that really respects and values flexibility and creativity is not necessarily easy work. However, what I'm seeing happen is, honestly, systems where that flexibility and creativity, it's not just respected, it's embraced. So there's a lot about voice and choice within much of the work that's going on already. And all of the subgroups are actually, it's amazing, creating systems while at the same time defining much more specific actions that are actually already taking place this year. So there's kind of that planning and that systems building work in addition to some of the actual implementation, even though the system is not quite fully documented yet. And that will probably make a little bit more sense when we get into the specific strategies. So again, back to the idea of systems. Defining a sense of defined autonomy is the kind of work that really fits within the culture of a district, again, that embraces flexibility and creativity. I've done a lot of reading. Daniel Pink is one of my favorites, and Daniel Pink says that autonomy means acting with choice, which means we can be both autonomous but yet interdependent with others. Okay. Just straight autonomy, you have to be careful because you're never going to get the full impact of all of the collective efforts if there isn't some level of strong articulation and interdependence amongst those within the community. That's the first part. I'll pause. Go right ahead.
And I just want to add one more thing to what Judy had shared. We're using something from Jim Collins in our work at a leadership level of thinking of our roles as leaders of these systems. And granted, as Judy had shared, it goes far beyond just the administrators. We have quite a robust curriculum council as being clock builders instead of time tellers. So there's a tendency to look at our leaders using that metaphor, if you will, as telling the time, someone we go to for information on how things get done. One of the beautiful things about Haldane is the culture that already exists within the school system. But we want to think of our curriculum council leaders, our formal department and building leaders as clock builders, those who are actively engaging others to create these systems that are interconnected. So the time telling, if you will, isn't dependent on any one individual. That we're overseeing an interconnected set of systems within our district that is not, after it becomes functional, is no longer dependent on any one individual.
Mm-hmm. And then we celebrate sustainability, right? Even though systems sometimes can feel like, do we have to do it that way? What your goal is to, yes, elevate the work, but then to ensure that the elevated work is also sustainable. Okay, so second part, now let's get into some of the detail. I will tell you that we looked at all 5 strategies in the Strategic Coherence Plan, and we ended up choosing the 3 of them that really have the strongest teaching and learning focus. And so our 3 subgroups, yes, they're numbered 1, 2, and 4, because that's how they are in the Strategic Coherence Plan, are around curriculum alignment, professional learning, and vulnerable populations is the language that was kind of pulled out of the 4th strategy, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So the first one, K-12 curriculum alignment. It took me a long time. I had a lot of text on that slide to begin with. I don't like it, and I said, let me find a visual. So this is the one that I came up with. Vertical alignment is something that really was really critical if what you're looking for is maximizing student growth, right? And one of the real benefits of the Haldane School District is the fact that you have some pretty low mobility. So many of your children are here from grade K all the way through grade 12. And we certainly can think about then, so how do we make sure that their path, their journey, is always progressively building on what they already are bringing in, right? So on the bottom there, you see they're actually 13 colored pencils, so we could have labeled them K to 12, but sometimes you really have to just kind of like say, okay, so where are we going to do some significant benchmarking? And it might look something like that. K, 2, 5, 8, 12, right? As kids are transitioning to the next level. So in this area, the kind of things that are happening already is actually the leadership team engaged this past summer in coming together around really building a consensus, collective understanding around curriculum design, quality curriculum design. We worked with a consultant author, her name is Angela Laylor, for a couple of days this summer. She is actually going to begin working with our first design cohort of teachers. We have 10 who have said that they can make the time and space for this beginning in January. And their goal will be to, again, articulate curriculum in a way that we can be a little bit more intentional around the vertical alignment. So the way that that's going to happen pretty much is by using a common curriculum unit template. It's not something that is going to equate to lesson planning. It's really more on the level of unit design, and that's happened in this district before. But what we're doing now is using a cohort of teachers to really start with the template. We already have it, it's draft, and give feedback as to how it has to be modified, differentiated for different levels of learners or different disciplines. So that's a really exciting first step. Again, that will start in January. Our design with Angela is that there would be level 1 and level 2 cohorts, as many as 4, between now and next fall, to really, again, support teachers in doing this in groups, right, collective groups. Our first cohort is absolutely K-12. We have teachers from high school, middle school, and elementary, and a couple of district level folks. So that's really the beginning of this work. You will notice that the focus is on the Haldane Essentials. But that said, What we still need is more system building around just what does quality curriculum look like, and how do we make sure that teachers, not only who teach that course or grade level, but teachers that need to know what students had before and what the expectations are afterwards, right? So that the vertical alignment piece. The Haldane Essentials themselves right now, we have definition for them that we pulled out of current research. But what we have not done yet, and probably won't get to this year, we'll do some conversations around it, but it's a real, so what does that look like, right? If a second grader is progressing in terms of their growth mindset, what does that look like? So developing that kind of continuum, some people like to call it a rubric. I think you have to be a little bit more flexible about that. We're going to get started with that this year, have faculty spend a little bit more time going deeper in each of the essentials, but probably will be something that will be more summer or into the next school year. The next subgroup is working on professional learning, and again, with an eye towards actually developing a professional learning plan that hopefully will be to you for approval for the 21-22 school year. But in the meantime, also designing and implementing professional learning that are aligned with both the elements of the plan, but also with the current needs. So you wouldn't be surprised to know that right now we have an in-service course up and running on instructional technology that actually will culminate with 20 teachers here in Haldane achieving Google certification, level 1 certification. So again, plan is being developed, needs assessment with faculty, but at the same time offering in-service courses and after-school sessions to just continue to meet current needs. The third strategy subgroup, again, is around vulnerable populations. But if you go back and actually read the strategy itself, it is to ensure that all students, including those from historically underserved or vulnerable populations, have high expectations for success and equitable access to opportunities to learn. So that's really the focus of that fourth one. Is really around both instruction and intervention. That's why I kind of modified our little diagram there. And what that group is working on, it's huge, is developing a multi-tiered system, again, focus on system, of support plan that you should have, again, for your review and adoption, hopefully early next school year. That little equation over there on the right-hand side, you know, Judy, the math girl, had to put an equation in the presentation. Can you figure out what that means? It's the multi-tiered system of support is really your response to intervention stuff, right? The RTI stuff, plus then a very, very intense focus on social emotional learning, and certainly within the context of what we have going on this year. Don't know if the timing could have been better. So there certainly is, again, there are things happening within this area. We certainly are delivering academic intervention services to students who are demonstrating need. We're trying to be a little bit more deliberate, again, about the vertical articulation amongst what does that look like, elementary, middle, and high school, making sure that, especially with less standardized testing, that we have the right set of entrance and exit criteria, and that the processes in the buildings are, again, looking very much at data-driven processes, but also keeping in mind the whole child, both academic skills as well as social emotional learning. Longer than I wanted, a little bit about a lot of work. Any questions?
Sure, I'll ask a question.
Thanks,
Very
Mike.
interesting time to be taking this on. How do you begin to assess the impacts of the spring and the impacts of the fall and virtual learning. I know that as one measure, the NWEAs were taken at the beginning of the year, and I'm sure there's been some deep analysis done on that and standing. But beyond that, especially on some things like social emotional learning, like how do you build that, and what does that fit into one of the 3 subgroups as it currently stands, or is that can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think it fits actually into all of them,
Okay.
right? Because it certainly is part and parcel of curriculum.
Yeah.
It's part of the professional learning that all of our faculty members, are continuing to think about refining their own practices, and certainly part of this one. I think if I had to put it in a bucket, I'd probably put it in the one that's on the screen right now, John. But again, I think there's connective tissue in all of them. You mentioned the measures of academic progress. That's the component of NWEA that has been administered here in the fall. And people have begun to really look at that. I will tell you that actually Marianne and I were on a regional call on Friday with many school leaders who want to really think together about what that all says. NWEA, of course, this is their business. This is what they do really well. They've come out with a report for us to access to be able to, again, provide a process for looking at our own data in-house and the regional, because there are so many districts that use it. I believe there will be a regional users group that will do some additional thinking together around that. But in addition to the standardized measures, of course, just your regular classroom assessment, right? DRA2s and all of the rich assessment that here in Haldane you were able to do because kids have been in school, which has just really been very helpful. But certainly social emotional, I think that kids are so resilient there. But we know that that doesn't mean that they haven't been in some way impacted. So I do believe that it will take time for us to really be able to say, okay, no, because you always have some level of regression, you have the ups and downs, to be able to say that that was directly related to the fact that there had to be so much distance learning going on. I don't know if that actually is going to be very beneficial for anybody. I think it's really about them moving forward. Where is he now? What can she do now? And then how do I make sure that I'm scaffolding instruction, right, and designing supports that will move them along that continuum.
I have kind of a follow-up question for John and then a second one. So I completely respect what you're saying, definitely. Like, it would be difficult, and sort of what's the purpose of making determinations about whether a student's, where a student is in learning progressions, whether or not it's due to the pandemic. But and it hadn't occurred to me until now, and I'm not asking for it for any time soon, but I do think at least I and maybe the board would like to know, well, what evidence is there that there has been, that our students aren't doing as well as we might have anticipated otherwise? I mean, NWA came out with a report that's gotten a lot of press that says, in fact, actually lots of kids have maintained pretty well for reading, but the math has been a real problem, right? And that's not surprising, especially in a community like this. So I think, I definitely totally appreciate that point of view, but I think it would be helpful to know sort of where, if we think they're going to be unusual levels of need.
Yeah. Because what you're looking at is trying to grow more than a year in a year.
Yeah,
right?
And I mean, because I think there are real implications. I think there are real implications for that. And I can imagine, because, I mean, I've just from the outside sort of seeing how hard people have worked and, of all the efforts being made, it really might be that our kids have not had the same types of, learning lags as we might have expected. And I think the community would like, I don't know. I think I would like to know at some point if other people want to know and think it's worthwhile someone's time.
I think the knowledge is one thing, the what to do about it is the other.
That's the more
And-
important piece, but yeah.
Right. So I will tell you that in our curriculum design work, what we have done specifically related to this is make sure that in addition to the learning targets for a specific unit, there is also a dedicated field for the priority or the prior concepts, right, that kids would have needed to master or become proficient with before they can get to this next level. And that's because, again, we recognized early this year that, wait, no, it can't be that first we have to go back and reteach from March to June in a course or in a grade level. But it's really, you've got to finesse it. You've got to take, so now within this unit, what did I expect kids to bring in, and did they? So the amount of diagnostic assessment, and then small group instruction, because not all, kids are going to present very differently, has been woven into this template that people will start to use. And Peggy, yes, the NWEA report did say that, reading, no, they're looking pretty good in the ELA. Math is the area where it appears that there were absolutely, there are some gaps.
Yeah.
And just,
So my other,
can I just follow up with that? I do believe Dr. Benante had mentioned that once the NWEA results are in and analyzed, he will be sharing those.
Yeah, John had made a similar inquiry, I think back in September, and I know at least at the elementary level, Christine and I had already looked at the reports that the NWEA was providing specific to that question, or very closely to that question, and Christine and I had a chance to review the elementary data, so we'll compile that and provide it to the board, because we do believe we have it all now.
And just one more thing about that, as you guys were talking, we talk about the academic assessment, right? And then we always say, well, how do we assess social emotional? How do we know how our kids are doing emotionally, right? It's a different way to assess it. But I was wondering, I imagine there are measures for how many behavioral issues have come up, how many social worker appointments have been made, how much absenteeism is there, things like that might actually give us a picture of how the kids are doing emotionally or socially, or a combination of both. So I don't know if that data is readily available or if that's a big ask, but as we were talking about assessing where our kids are academically, those kind of thoughts popped into my head of how can we assess in some other ways as well.
I totally agree with that. I think I was going to say, I'm going to say the fuzzy thing first, and then come back to a question at the beginning. But the real fuzzy thing for me in this is, I get the curriculum structure at the front. That totally makes sense. Consistent unit templates, understanding of scaffolding, and at some point, understanding through the grades of, okay, second grade is here, I'm in 10th grade, that's great. I totally get the professional learning, that totally makes sense to me. The social emotional learning, I don't know how you get under that. Like, and I think I'm gonna piggyback on you, is like, I think if we really wanna be serious about it, we have to have some structured way to understand how our kids are doing. And I don't think it's necessarily always like some of our kids acting out in school, are they being referred, or that sort of, like, that's the tail. But how are you doing every day? And I don't know, we're not in that place. I feel like as a district, we haven't been, and we need to move there, and we're moving there. But that's really interesting to me. I just don't know how to get under it, so.
So two connections to that. First of all, Christine and Tara have the leadership role on this last subgroup, and one of the things that they were able to do early in the process was meet with the clinicians, the district clinicians, and actually talk about the services even that are provided. They happen, but it's kind of like they're not necessarily always clear to everyone. So that they've done, and they've talked a little bit about, yes, and how do we measure, right, progress or lack of progress. But then the other thing to think about, the other connection, is when I go back to the Haldane Essentials, and growth mindset, and emotional intelligence, and wellness. You know, so it's not even that, yeah, we've got these other things. No, that's half of your set of valued outcomes. So I think that it's not going to be easy. I don't think there's a lot out there to replicate, to be honest with you. I think it's cutting edge kind of stuff. And I think that what we need to be doing is we need to be thinking about really the perspective that that classroom teacher, that person that's working with those third graders day in and day out, how they can help really to define then what it means for a student. And again, third grade, chronologically, you know, you've got usually better than about a year in that third grade classroom, but just what does that continuum look like? And where are the places where you go, wait a minute, something's not feeling so good here, what do we do to intervene? So, but it's absolutely not simple. And I think it will take a very, very rich process involving lots of people.
Well, I just think about implications for the board and for the budget. If you think about, like, I will bet, and somebody's going to correct me because I'm probably wrong, but I'll bet, like, when we get designated a blue ribbon school, or we get top X% schools, and none of the criteria that go into those assessments talk about social emotional learning or emotional intelligence or growth mindset. So that's what school is, and the instructional industry is geared on assessing. And so if we're really making a commitment to this, we're going to have to figure something out that's probably not the norm, which will be fascinating, but interesting.
And just to add to it, John, I think you're spot on. That certainly was part of our discussion with the Coherence planning team last year. And even the dependence on those academic indicators are not even reflective of critical thinking necessarily, or problem solving, or communication skills.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to be designated as an excellent school by some of the more formal standards that are out there. Blue ribbon, whether it be that, or a recognition school by New York State, but they're highly dependent on test scores, and those tests that are utilized aren't necessarily reflective of the things we value, or we're stating that we value within for our students, or what we want our students to achieve. So it's not to discredit any of those recognitions that we've received in the past. Those are outstanding, but we took a step back from that last year to really examine, but what are the critical skills and attributes that we want to make sure all of our students attain or are able to demonstrate by the end of their experience here. So we don't want to take that for granted that it's occurring.
I have a sort of a technical question. So you had this MTSSR equals RTI plus SEL. That, I'll be honest, doesn't make sense to me, so I'll need you to explain it to me. I think of MTSS as being a multi-tiered systems of support for reading, or multi-tiered systems of support for math, or multi-tiered systems of support for social emotional or behavioral issues, not integrating. The plus sign confuses me a little bit. So can you just tell me a little bit what that equation means to you all?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Peggy. And technically, I see RTI, which was RTI squared when it first came out, right? Response to instruction and intervention, absolutely had both components, the academic as well as I think it was called behavioral back in the day. There was not, I believe this is how we ended up with MTSS. There was just not enough recognition of that other side of the triangle. And so now it's, lots of times you'll see MTSS is RTI plus PBIS. I think it's a little bit broader than that, but I think what it's trying to do is come back and kind of elevate that it's not just about the academic skills. Yeah, so maybe there's some redundancy in there. And I have to say that was a colleague from here in Putnam that came up with that equation. And it was something that people went like, yeah, that makes sense. But what you did is you just went down, all the way down into the nuance.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks.
Sure.
Judy, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome, my
Really
pleasure.
fantastic. We went a little out of order. We went with Judy's presentation first. And when Dr. Benante is ready, he will give us his COVID update.
More updates than usual, so I
Understand
needed to
that.
rely on a slide deck for this week, so excuse me for that, because these have been a little
We're
less
voting.
formal in previous weeks, but I didn't want to forget anything. So obviously, last week was a busy week for us, and I think we had talked really multiple times throughout the school year that at some point we may come to a point where I think we knew, I shouldn't say we thought, where we would be impacted by COVID within our community more directly in our ability to have to either advise families of the need to quarantine, their children to quarantine, or have to close school. And both of those situations arose last week. Of course, as these things go, happening all at once is not preferred, but we don't have control of that. So we had a staff member who was in direct contact with students who subsequently tested positive, and those students had to quarantine. And we also had a number of staff members at our high school who were in contact with a person who tested positive for COVID, thus, which is becoming more common in our secondary schools throughout our region, thus us having to now close the school physically, proceed to all remote learning because of our inability to staff the building, and feeling that, in lieu of bringing a number of substitutes in, that we could facilitate all remote instruction for our kids. So we're currently in these two environments. Our fifth graders are nearing the end of their period of quarantine this week, and our high school staff members are as well. However, given the timing of that, and now in light of some weather heading our way, it made sense just for our high school to remain closed, or for us to remain on all remote instruction through the winter break. So that was last week. I'm pleased to report that the last few days have been relatively quiet. And something that we're seeing, and we're sitting with this right now, is that there's a number of families who are reaching out to us to share that they had their child tested, or maybe it's a staff member who's having a test completed as a more of a precautionary measure out of an abundance of caution, more so than specific to any concern over actually being infected. They're not displaying any symptoms. And in some ways that's very helpful to us. In other ways, we're sitting with what do we need to know and what do we need not to know, I should say, because that I can be honest or candid in that there are times when that information comes to us where it's very helpful in anticipating the potential need to contact trace and to be able to expedite the contact tracing process, which can allow us, depending on the situation, to not have to keep our school, the physical campus, open, and to not have to have all students default to a remote learning environment on any given day, because given our size and given the time that our administrators and other professionals are committing to this, we can facilitate contact tracing rather quickly. And that was the case in one example last week, because we were anticipating, well, this may happen, and if it does, what series of actions are we going to put into motion? So we're sitting with that because it may be useful to now use that as a strategy or a broad strategy, and notify our community of such. So I do anticipate we'll have some things to communicate to families and to staff after the winter break. Here's how you can help us keep our schools physically open, so we don't have to use a blanket default to all remote instruction in the coming weeks. Because I do think we're clearly within that period of time where we very well are going to be impacted by this through the next 2 months at least. So I do think that last week illustrated how our preventative measures and our response measures are working on campus. We did not have any additional positive cases that have stemmed from those on-campus contacts, which I think in total, we have close to 80 individuals currently quarantining, with none of them subsequently becoming infected or positive, and a number of whom have had COVID tests conducted in that time, but they're still required to complete their quarantine. But yet, it is difficult to avoid disruption to instruction. We've spoken of this in the past, where there may be this period of time where defaulting to an all-remote environment because we're anticipating potentially cases arising out of what's going on in our community may just very well be what's best for our students and what's best for our staff. And I do think we're in that scenario right now, and will be. So with that, I am, or as you know, I did state that December 21st through 23rd, we're going to be all remote days. Again, in anticipation that we're in this window where infection rates are really high in our area. We do have a number of families that have notified us that they're pending COVID test results. And just if you look at the statistics and the volume of testing that we're aware of occurring, some of those cases are going to result in positives. And thus, we have to begin the contact tracing process. So limiting the number of students who are coming on to campus for a period of time, one, allows for us to see the results of that, to not have any last-minute the potential for last-minute disruptions to our families and to our school community. In consultation with Dr. Corsaro late last week, he did advise that it would be prudent for us to extend all remote instruction for at least a 1-week period of time post-winter break. And I am going to go ahead and announce that tomorrow. And what we're trying to avoid is, again, the post-holiday surge that we think we experienced and were directly impacted by last week. And you may be familiar with this this graph. I know it doesn't display great from at least from where I'm sitting, but perhaps for those at home, this is from the Putnam County Department of Health, and you'll notice a couple delineations on the chart. One is Halloween, which is the first date along the x-axis there, and then Thanksgiving there. And you can see that really post these periods of time when people tend to gather, we are seeing a significant increase in infection throughout Putnam County. And anecdotally, I would believe we're seeing this in Phillipstown as well, and in Cold Spring as well. So once that infection rate is getting north of 5%, you're going to see direct community impact. So we don't know what's going to transpire over the next week or so, seeing it as some significant holidays either have approached or we're going to be approaching. And Dr. Corsaro is advising us to consider taking that week post winter break to see, again, are we experiencing a surge? And as a means of further assessing, is a longer shift to all remote learning necessary? My hope is that it's not, that we would be back in school on the 11th. But as some districts are already going as far as taking that second week and designating it for all remote instruction as well and announcing that to their communities. I am not yet. I do think that it's prudent for us to see what transpires in the 2 weeks to come, and then I'll make a decision early, hopefully early that week of the 4th of January. So that's new news to the board. Obviously, that has not been announced to the community, although if anybody's watching tonight, they'll hear it. That is an announcement that I'm going to make tomorrow, given my conversation with Dr. Corsaro and what, again, I think we're experiencing and continue to experience as a school community right now with a number of cases within our community. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, for people that can't see, I think it's important to point out that the measurement there is positivity rate, not
Correct.
Number of cases, right? And
Correct.
those are big. That's a big change, and then leveling off after Halloween, and a big change after Thanksgiving as well. And so to me, it's actually really useful to see this positivity rate
Right.
chart.
And we function for the majority of September through October hovering right around a 1%
Yeah.
positivity rate as a county. And, the county number isn't necessarily reflective of what's going on within our specific community, but it's an indicator. It's the closest indicator that we have to approximate direct community impact. And now you're seeing a positivity rate on a rolling average still around 7.5% to 8%. We had one day, I believe it was about 10 days ago, where at the county level it was 12.5%. Another day where it was 10, another day 9. So, we're getting into, that's a significant level of community impact. And that's, of course, when you started to see, in our case, the phone was ringing, people were advising us, and then a few days later we were having our own issues with confirmed cases within our community that impacted other kids and families. So this is what we're monitoring right now. So what's ahead? We're going to continue to monitor the COVID-related issues through the winter break, assess the potential extension of all remote beyond January. January 8th is the Friday, so January 11th is my hope to have students back onto campus at that point. But again, there may be a need to go to the 18th is Martin Luther King Day, so it would be the 19th, I believe. We are still pursuing options for testing. The Department of Health has submitted their application for rapid testing materials to the New York State Department of Health. The issue that's coming up with that, and now this is becoming a bit of an advocacy effort on our end, is that New York State DOH is not releasing the testing materials until your community has been designated as a yellow, orange, or red zone. Now, in most cases, because if you read the news, Beacon was just able to attain 1,000 rapid tests. Beacon is not within one of these designated microcluster zones. What Beacon had done in speaking with their superintendent, and Dr. Landau was great at getting back to me right away, they applied directly for the test to New York State instead of doing it through their Department of Health, which you think it shouldn't work that way, but if that's what it takes, then we'll entertain applying directly to New York State. There's some things that come with that we have to sort through on an administrative level, but if that's the pathway to get testing established in the school, we'll do it that way. In the meantime, we felt as a group of superintendents in Putnam County, it was prudent to apply through the Department of Health, thinking that would be a way to expedite an approval process, because you think the County Department of Health would be a direct connection to the state, but it just doesn't seem to be playing out that way. I know this is a topic that also our county executive has included as part of her calls with the governor's office, which there's a weekly process for the county executives to connect with the governor's office. So I know that this is a topic on everyone's agendas right now to try to establish for our schools, because if we want to remain open through the winter and have minimal disruption to our school community, we have to have a testing structure in place. There are other testing strategies that could be employed. We could lean on our families to provide, to go get tested and provide those results to us as a means, again, of doing that. But again, that places the burden on the family. I have concerns about equity when that comes up, and access to testing, and some of the potential barriers for some of our families to get tested. So having it on the school site is a preferred pathway for us. And then the vaccination plan obviously is a hot topic. Second vaccination appears to be approved. That's helpful long-term for us. The more vaccines that have approval, the more vaccines that become available to New York State. Our school staff are included in Tier 2 of New York State's tiered plan. There are 4 tiers. The 4th tier being, just regular citizens with no necessary direct need to access the vaccination first. I think that's encouraging that school employees are included in Tier 2 of that plan. So my hope would be, as we get into the late winter, early spring, if things continue to move in a positive direction, we could be talking about a vaccination plan for our staff. Again, whether that be done at a county level or whether it be done in our educators or school personnel's home counties. There should be more access to that than just the general public. And that will be helpful, again, in keeping our schools operational up through the end of the school year. So a lot going on, a lot developing, certainly through the last 2 weeks. We're very mindful of the shifts to all remote learning. I do feel that the shifts at this point are appropriate going into next week. Again, that provides a 2-week period of time where our kids will be home, again, through the winter break, and then heeding Dr. Corsaro's advice to use that week post-winter break as an observational period to determine if it's necessary to go any further seems prudent at this point. I want to maintain that I believe our schools are safe. Again, I think what we encountered last week, while disruptive, has only reiterated that. So shifting to all remote learning, and I'm paying close attention to how this is being framed in other communities, because other communities are experiencing issues with COVID very differently. We've had 2 incidents that have impacted our school, whereas there's other school districts that have had dozens, because the community rate of spread is much more pronounced than or significant than I believe what we're experiencing here, again, in Cold Spring, Phillipstown, Nelsonville areas. So we're not seeing any concern related to spread within the school, given what we experienced last week. What we're trying to, while we're applying this strategy to shift to all remote learning, it's for continuity of instruction purposes. I'd rather have our students remain home for a period of time on a consistent schedule. Our families can plan around that. So instructional continuity is maintained, as opposed to coming in and out of school potentially due to issues we're encountering with infected individuals being on campus and then having to quarantine or advise families to quarantine for a number of individuals, and that then interfering with what goes on our campus each day. So again, we're within this. We thought we would be here. We're here, and with that, I'll open it up to questions.
I had a question.
Yep.
In the spring, we talked about the employees that aren't really as needed when we're all remote, bus drivers, cleaners, et cetera. And we created, I feel like we did it a couple of times, where we said, okay, well, the board agreed to pay for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks later, we said, okay, let's renew it. And then there was at some point, we said, okay, that we can't keep paying them. What is your expectation for how long are we able to keep staff that aren't necessarily working, getting paid or on payroll? Is there a point where we have to, have this conversation as a board again?
Sure. I think it's a good question, Jen, and it's the difficult part of our work as an administration, and I know your work as a Board of Education, as trustees of the school system, where you're being mindful, or we are all being mindful of our employees and a sense of responsibility to them, but also mindful of we are a taxpayer-funded entity, and many in our community have been impacted by this pandemic and have been directly impacted financially, and the costs that are associated with running our operation, and demonstration to our community that we're being prudent with their tax dollars and reducing costs wherever we can. So that's a delicate balance, right? Staff needs, especially this time of year, as we're around the holidays. So our staff has examined the potential for having to furlough certain employees. Based on our conversation as of today, we feel that through the period of time that I'm presenting to the board to be all remote, so through the 7th, that we can still keep our employees meaningfully engaged on work and projects that need to be done on campus, as long as we have the cooperation of our bargaining units to do so. So it may mean, and we're specifically talking about our CSEA unit, as you mentioned. If our students are not here, it's less need for transportation, although we're still responsible for transporting out-of-district students. Less need within our cafeteria staff. custodial maintenance, not in the same way. It's a different type of need. We can move more towards preventative maintenance and longer-term projects with our M&O staff. And obviously, we have to keep the buildings running and operational. But as long as we have the cooperation of their unit, and this is a conversation we have to have with them, we can keep those employees who may not be necessarily needed, engaged in other work areas, and we don't have to get into a furloughing scenario yet. If we were to extend beyond the 7th or the 8th, I think at that point, the administration may very well be presenting to the board a discussion or thoughts relating to furloughing particular employees. We just don't know what's going to play out in the next few weeks. If that trend were to continue and we're to see infection rates, upwards of 15%, we're not going to be in school. It's just there's going to be so much direct impact that it's going to make sense to shift to all remote instruction for a prolonged period of time. And that's where I think furloughing comes back, certainly on the table. But just not quite there yet.
Okay.
And I think that's good for us, again, trying to manage that balance. My sense is that the community, we certainly could do it if we were in that position where we felt, we needed to save as much money as we could right now. This goes back to decisions that we made very early on, through last year's budget cycle, going up to the levy limit. From where we sit right now, I'm not seeing a level of fiscal stress that in other districts they are, and out of necessity they're furloughing. We're not there yet. And again, I think it goes back to our community support for our budget last school year. Some good financing through this school year when we talk about refinancing debt, as Ann had shared with you last meeting. And the positive result of that, we're able to keep things operational and just good planning. We're able to utilize our staff, and I think we'll have the cooperation of our units to keep folks employed during a time of the year where I think we don't want to deliver news like that to our employees. Being respectful and mindful, though, of the community impact.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So just have one last note that on, so Thursday, it's supposed to snow. If you haven't heard, and although some insist it's going to rain, I think it's gonna snow. So we're going to try to do our best, depending on how the storm's shaping up, to announce to families tomorrow what our plans are for Thursday. As a reminder, we made the decision early on to keep our snow days built into our calendar. So if it is a significant weather event, Thursday will be a snow day. It is my hope our kids do not go back on computer screens and iPads and those things. They go outside and shovel, obviously, for their families, and we can make that part of the homework, right? But they go outside and play and get outside and enjoy a snow day. But it does bring into question Friday, because, and I'm just being candid with the board tonight, and I'm going to try to frame this as best I can in a notice to the community. You get into these bigger storms where ultimately it impacts a second day. Depending on power outages, especially in our area, or just the need for additional snow removal, which would potentially move us into having delay on Friday. I would rather shift to an all-remote day on Friday and have a full all-remote day in lieu of delaying school, because we lose instructional time if we need that. So we have to assess, are there power outages? What does it look like the impact of the storm's going to be into Friday? And it very well may just be best for us to make Friday an all-remote day, and then obviously that will carry into next week with the days we've already declared, or I've already declared as such, not to sound so hierarchical, but so that's just something I'm being mindful of. I know our other superintendents in the area are. We were talking about it today. I thought the snow day calls were going to be easy this year. This one certainly won't be, because of the implications, again, on the day that follows. So I just wanted to give the board a heads up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any communication from the public at this time? Okay, our committee minutes are here. The policy committee met on December 8th. And we're going into our information on reports. Our student advisor is, I'm sure, very busy doing very important things this evening, and so he's not here. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Jamin.
Good evening. So last time I had to leave for a family emergency, so thank you to Ms. Sniffen who stood in for me. But at that report, our students had just transitioned in, our families who had chosen to return from full remote instruction. So I just want to recap that they have transitioned in, they've done well. With the community rates that were shown here, we have had just a handful of students revert back to remote instruction, but less than 5. So we continue to have more than half of our students that started remote are back on campus and have remained on campus through today, which is wonderful and going well. This month's board report focused on 3 things. One, our students wrote letters to various community members at the Thanksgiving holiday, and they were really touching artwork, letters. They went home with meals from the community and also through our senior center. So that was really wonderful to see. We've gotten 2 letters back from seniors who want to continue and are hoping that we just have more artwork coming their way and wanting to share their stories with our students. And I'm sure there are more that just haven't written to me. So that's been wonderful. And then I wanted to just talk about the 5th grade. Right before Thanksgiving, we had seen those community rates increasing and spent a lot of time as a faculty working on what the plans would be if we went remote, communicating with families through Google Classroom. If we're remote for a short period of time, this is what you can anticipate. If we go remote for a longer period of time, this is how that schedule would shift. And so when the 5th grade did need to go to remote, I would just like to compliment our students, our families, our staff, our teachers on the fact that with very minimal confusion, a couple of kids saying, oh, I'm in the wrong spot, I'm in your class, or mix-ups, they were able to transition and have that transition to remote instruction go very smoothly. I anticipate that next week, whether it be Friday with a snow day or Monday, with the fact that it's anticipated versus being just an emergency transition, we've had a lot of time to prepare, to talk, to communicate with families. And so it's been a blessing to be on campus, to have our students in the classroom, to be able to go through Google Classroom with them and show them this is where you're going to see it. So I anticipate that there will always be confusion that first day, but that it will go smoothly and we'll be able to address any of those concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Dr. Seelke.
Good evening, everyone, and happy holidays. I want to highlight from my board report the outcome of the Connected project, Haldane's Connected project. So this project was first proposed by Rebecca Pearsall, who is the VP to the middle school of the PTA. And early on when Rebecca took that role, she was concerned about the fact that some of our students were remote and some are in person, and just concerned that there be a feeling of unity among the entire Haldane community, because it's part of what makes our community special. And she proposed this idea for putting a contributed word for each community member onto a strand of lights that would string the community all together and hold us together in unity. And I told her I thought it was a great idea. And she was concerned because we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Like, is it well received to do something lighthearted and in this type of time? And I said, well, let's write it up and give it to Dr. Benante. And Dr. Benante supported it wholeheartedly. He thought it was a great project. And then we brought it to the community, who also responded. I mean, the number of emails and flooded inboxes that people have to receive over 300 responses and unique responses with words representing unity from our community. It was wonderful, and our Discover, Create, and Innovate classes run by Mr. Horn, the students lovingly hand wrote in Sharpie marker the words onto the tags and attached the tags onto the lights. And then with the help of Mr. Walsh and our buildings and grounds crew, we strung the lights on the Knoll Rock. If you haven't had a chance to see them tonight as you leave, please take a look. It's one thing to have an area of the campus lit because the light itself as winter approaches is beautiful, but to know that on those lights are the tags of the words that were contributed by our community, the symbolism of it is lovely and quite warm. So please enjoy that, and thank you for your participation in it.
Thank you. Ms. Sniffen.
Good evening, everyone. Piggybacking a little bit on what Christine Jamin had just shared about transitioning to all remote. Obviously, the high school, we would prefer to have the students in the building. We miss them. That direct connection that students have with teachers is just so critical. And it's hard to do that through a screen. However, I do believe we are making the best of that. A lot of work went into looking at the all remote schedule at the high school as well. We had initially in July talked about 30-minute periods, and we're going to have every class every day. And as we went through this beginning of the school year, and we looked at, we have 4 periods a day, right, to reduce exposure. If we have to go to contact tracing, it was only 4 periods within that day to help try to keep us safer longer and in school. So through that, a group of teachers, myself, some parents, and students got together to really talk about the all remote and what makes sense. And we were talking about best instruction and what makes sense for student learners and how do we capitalize on this environment. And collectively came up with a longer period of time in this environment as opposed to a 30-minute shorter class 9 times within the day is a better environment for instructional purposes. It allows us to have breakout rooms. It allows us time to dive in to deeper thinking. Some of the students said we would only be able to do 1 AP stats question in 30 minutes by the time we got on and got back off again. So I think collectively, while in July we were saying synchronous, 30 minutes, see every teacher, upon reflection and coming together and recognizing what's best for the learner, we are looking at having 60-minute periods, 65-minute periods, 4 of them a day, and really diving into the learning in this environment. So I just want to thank the teachers, the students, the parents that collectively helped in really looking at that. With that, just going back a little bit on the sports, congratulations. I know Dr. Benante tweeted it as well and put out that all of our fall teams were scholar athlete teams this year. So both the cross country, boys and girls, both the soccer, boys and girls, and the girls tennis team. So congratulations to all those students, the coaches, and as Marianne said, have a great holiday season.
Thank you. Ms. Rounds.
Good evening. So we continue to talk a lot about social emotional supports. And in my board report this month, I highlighted the chance that I had to sit on one of our DBT consultation meetings that our clinicians have. They meet weekly, and then twice a month our consultant comes or doesn't come anymore, she Zooms, and they meet with her. And so in my board report, it sort of outlines how a DBT consultation occurs. The clinicians engage in a mindfulness activity, which is a big part of DBT. Then they rate their level of burnout in order to be able to support one another because, they're supporting everyone else. They're there to support one another as well. And DBT is also designed to prevent burnout of clinicians. They provide a reminder of one of the dialectical agreements. There's several of them to kind of keep their work focused during the meeting. And then at this particular meeting, they talked about one of our department goals, which is to expand DBT to incorporate the current needs of staff and students. So they came up with a bunch of different ideas along with this consultant who brought some of her resources as well. Several of them I listed here. One of them, building emotional resistance as a way to reframe self-care, because I think that people are starting to grow tired of the term self-care in some places. So discussing that and how to do that. More talk about, acceptance as a coping mechanism. But one that they're really thinking about now is practicing gratitude as a coping strategy. And they're discussing ways to do that together. And they started this month with just sharing, sending an email to the staff saying how much gratitude they have and how grateful they are for the work that they're doing. We brought coffee and hot chocolate for you to enjoy, to stop in, get a cup, expressing their gratitude, and to hopefully in the future build on, ways to encourage the staff to express their own gratitude as a way of coping. So that's where they are right now, and they'll continue to do that work and continue to do their best to support the staff and the students in any way that they can.
Thank you. And Tara,
Thank
I just wanted
you.
to say I appreciated how you wrote your report this week, because it really gave me this great picture of what was happening at the meetings.
Oh, good. Okay.
You could have just said, I was at a DBT consultation, blah, blah, and moved on to another bullet point, and that also would have been fine. But you took the time to break it down and really tell us what you were working on. And I just wanted to share that. For me, that was really helpful. Gave me some really nice insight. So
Thank
thanks
you.
for doing that. Okay. Mr. Walsh.
Good evening. The Facilities Department continues to clean and disinfect. That's been our prime. It's been the primary focus for the past several months, and will just continue to be throughout. We have managed to do some other things besides clean and disinfect throughout the past couple months. A lot of painting going on, typical PM of equipment. The word of the evening is snow. That's at least another focus of ours. We've PM'd all the equipment. We're ready to go. We have the snow team prepared. We'll be meeting tomorrow, and we'll be ready for tomorrow night and for Thursday for the removal of snow. This will be my first major snowstorm. So I don't want to say I'm looking forward to it, but I guess we're looking forward to it. In terms of capital construction, electrical mechanical phase, it's being designed by Fuller and D'Angelo, is nearly complete. That will be submitted to the state this week. Review times at the state is about 6 to 8 weeks, so we're hoping to get those plans back and approved from the state near the end of winter, early spring, and hopefully we can go out to bid with that for hopeful construction over the summer. The contract that is awarded, which is Arrow Steel, that's the window replacement for the elementary school building. They've been on site doing some field measuring. They've been providing submittals to Fuller and D'Angelo for review, and we're hoping to get those shop drawings over to the manufacturer shortly so we can get in line for manufacturing to get all the materials here for summer construction. And that's all, unless there's any questions.
Quick question. Remind me what's in the electrical mechanical piece.
Sure, there's a couple of areas that are getting air conditioning and
That's right.
renewed ventilation down in the cafeteria, nurses, wing, middle school principal and office, as long as with some of the band rooms. Music room, band room, they're getting new ventilation, new hot water heaters. It also includes some security in terms of replacement of old cameras, new cameras, as well as access control.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you. Okay, consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
it. So moved.
These are our minutes from our December 1st meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Dr. Benante, did you have anything
Jen,
you'd
if
like
I
to
may,
share?
I just
Yeah.
wanted to make note of Ms. Geller's indication that she'll be retiring at the end of the school year. I had a wonderful conversation with Mrs. Geller about her plans post-retirement. She certainly will be with us for the remainder of the school year, and we'll have more to say, hopefully in our ability to gather later this school year with our retirees. But we wanted to congratulate her on her anticipated retirement.
Very good. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, new business, the CSE CPSE recommendations. Ms. Platt?
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the Committees on Special Education and Preschool Special Education as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Retention and disposition schedule. Ms. Platt?
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby adopts the retention and disposition schedule for New York Local Government Records LGS-1, issued pursuant to Article 57A of the Arts and Cultural Affairs Law, and containing legal minimum retention periods for local government records for use by all officers in legally disposing of valueless records listed therein. Be it further resolved that in accordance with 57A, only those records will be disposed of that are described in retention and disposition schedule for New York local government records after they have met their minimum retention periods described therein, and B, only those records will be disposed of that do not have sufficient administrative, fiscal, legal, or historical value to merit retention beyond established legal minimum periods.
Thank you. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
Is this a change from something, or is something completely new?
It is a change at the state level. The previous retention schedule had been updated. It's now LGS-1. I don't believe there are any new records that we're required to retain that we were not already retaining. It's merely a matter of the state schedule document that outlines which records we're supposed to maintain and for how long has been updated. And we were guided through our policy service to examine this and to make sure, I believe all districts in New York State have to adopt this resolution by January 1, if I'm not mistaken, Catherine. Yeah.
That's correct, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Ms. Galante's contract.
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the terms of the contract in lieu of probation with Ms. Sarah Galante, a copy of which shall be incorporated by reference in the minutes of this meeting, and be it further resolved that the Board of Education does hereby authorize the Superintendent of Schools to execute such consulting services agreement on behalf of the district.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Dr. Benante, did you want to speak to
Yeah,
this?
so Ms. Galante had filled in for Ms. Prey at the beginning of the school year. As you're aware, Ms. Prey has announced her retirement mid-year. And any time that there's an unanticipated, whether it be a leave or in this case a retirement, it opens up the probationary position. However, this is an inopportune time to facilitate a search process as we normally would to fill the probationary period. Given that Ms. Galante was familiar with the class and the routines, and we're trying to prioritize continuity for those students as well, we felt it was prudent to have Ms. Galante fulfill the position for the remainder of the school year, and that will allow us an opportunity to open the position as we normally would at the conclusion of the school year, see if there's any interest in staff transfer, which is our responsibility obviously to the unit, to the HFA, and or to facilitate a search process and interview schedule as we normally would. So given the unanticipated nature of the retirement, this allows us that time to still stay and honor the processes and the procedures that we normally would when there's an open probationary period in our district.
And generally, we don't have unexpected retirements.
Correct.
For this very reason.
Yes.
But these are special times, and so we do special things. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, the memorandum of agreement, Ms. Platt.
Whereas on November 24th, 2020, representatives of the Board of Education and the Haldane Faculty Association reached agreement on a memorandum of agreement to create a one-year successor collectively negotiated agreement effective July 1st, 2020, and terminating on June 30th, 2021. And whereas Board of Education ratification is a requirement of said memorandum of agreement, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby ratifies the November 24th, 2020 memorandum of agreement and hereby appropriates those monies necessary to fund the 2020-2021 agreement between the district and the Haldane Faculty Association.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? A thank you to Sean McNall and John Headland, who are our board representatives at the with the HFA negotiations. So a thank you for you guys for your work. Do you have anything you'd like
I just
to say?
wanted to thank our representatives, so Sean and John, Ann Dinio, and Mike Lambert, our counsel, who were helpful on our end, and also Andrea McHugh, Tom Casey, the labor relations specialist for the HFA, as well as the HFA's negotiations team. This is a tough time to negotiate a contract, and I think I don't speak for our faculty association, but I believe they would acknowledge that as well. It's rarely the intention to go into a contract negotiation and only have a one-year settlement, but in light of the circumstances, I think it's fair. I think we were able to, I think it's a fair settlement for our teachers and for our school district, and we'll be right back at the table in a few months. But most importantly, we were able to get this done in a really complicated time to negotiate collective bargaining agreements. It's my understanding that many districts out there are not settling, and the fact that we were able to, I think, speaks to the culture within our school community and the desire on both parties' part to move forward and to look ahead to next school year.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, our mid-year self-evaluation. This is a check-in, and I'm going to turn it over to John to help us check in.
All right, I'll keep this quick. Now that we are almost done with Dr. Benante's mid-year self-evaluation, or we will launch into our own as a reminder, mostly to the public, but also to us. We launched this last year to make sure that as the board, we were doing some self-reflection. There is, and we will keep the structure unless anyone has any dramatic objections, is similar to last year. As you remember, there are 5 standards that we look to do self-assessment on. Let me see if I can do them. There's one for vision, there's one for communication, there's one for policy, there's one for ethical leadership, and I think there's one for fiscal oversight, general categories. And then in each of those, there are 5 we're not going to go to that level. So what we did last year, which I thought was useful for a mid-year self-evaluation, was just look at the top line, 5 standards, and provide feedback on the key standards we think we're doing well on, the key standards we think we could do improvement on. Just a mid-year checkpoint. At the end of the year, as you remember, we go through the whole rigmarole, which was good because it set us some guidelines for this year that were both put into practice through our own Board of Ed goals, but also through some of the things that we're bringing up at meetings. So I will send out the structure to all of you. The question that I have is on timing. We have a meeting on January 5th, and then we have so if we do look to have initial commentary by then, I think the challenge is that the following meeting, Jen is not here, and I think it's important that she be involved in the conversation. So I would throw it up that we can either push the sort of collective feedback to the meeting after that, the first meeting in February, or do something else. I'll throw that open to the board.
I would suggest that could we just push it so that everybody gives you their feedback by January 19th?
Yeah, sure.
And that we have a meeting as a group January or February, whatever that first February one is.
Yeah, sure.
Third
And that
or
may be
something?
actually what we did.
Second? Thank you.
The timing that we did last year too, so.
I like that.
Is
Great.
that okay?
Okay,
Yeah.
good, thank you.
And John, could you, you'll put that in a reminder
I
email
will,
to all of us with
absolutely.
the dates, and then we can stick it on the agendas too, so we
Perfect,
keep
thank you.
track of it. Thank you, John. Okay, any further communication from the public? Yes, Ms. Cecilia.
Hi. I just wanted to recognize my sister Deirdre Knapp, who's been here for 15 years, and she's literally pretty much on her way to Florida probably Thursday. So I just wanted to say she's had a great time here, and she's going to miss everybody.
Oh, thank you so much. Part of the Haldane family. Okay, board committee reports. So policy committee update. I'd like to turn those over to Peggy.
Yeah, I think I'll say two things. I mean, if you read the minutes, you saw that we've gone through, you know, all the things that we needed to go through for the second policy manual draft. I think I just do want to reiterate that in the process, we've been really very mindful of implementing only technical changes to the policies. Technical changes that reflect changes in law or other regulations that mandate change in policies. And I think as we go through it the next time, there may be other things that we want to dig into as a group. And I think the other thing, I don't want people to answer now, but now that it's back with Erie BOCES, the manual, we'll get it again. And I think we just want to start to think about what you all are going to want to know about any changes that, you know, any changes that were made, right? So there's lots of notes about individual policies, there's track changes versions about what happened. And I would just like people to begin to think a little bit about what they'd like to see before, because the idea is when that policy manual comes back, I actually don't remember, pretty quickly it will be ready for us to adopt. And yeah, you know, keeping in mind, again, that the changes that we have made reflect the law. And you're certainly welcome to look at whatever you want to look at. Just keep in mind, it took us months to do all of that. So anyway, that's just one thing I want y'all to begin thinking of.
So when it comes back, will we be able to, is it going to have like red lines?
No,
where
it will
we're gonna
not.
be able to see?
No, it will not.
That's what Peggy's saying.
That's what I'm saying.
If you want to
Yeah.
see the track changes, and
You would
that's
have
what
to
she
look
means
at the
by-
track changes version in draft policy manual 1 and the track changes version in policy in draft 2, as well as the hundreds of lines document where we've kept those changes. And everybody is welcome to look at. I mean, I really say this with all sincerity. Folks are really welcome to see all of that, right? It would be 2 track changes version of this, you know, 600-page document. There's not track changes on every page, though. A guide that really says what's happened to any of the policies in draft 1 and draft 2. That is all available, and we can make it available. I just think you want to think about how much you want to see. That's.
Well, it might be that the best process might just be to make it all available.
We could just, and that's actually, and
And then-
that's true. We could just pull it all together and create a folder that we share
Yeah.
with the board members
Yeah.
that shows the track changes version again.
Yeah.
You know,
And then
and
you
I
can
could
see what
walk
you wanna
folks
see.
through it.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah.
I have a,
Yeah, to have everything, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
my ask, if it's not too onerous, and this is not a do not spend, this can be a, because I know you have spent a ton of time on this, this can be a stream of conscious forthcoming sort of guide, which would be to identify if there are things that you wrestled with as a
No,
committee.
yeah.
If it was just like, here's the law, we got to slot the law in. But if there are things that were like, this is dramatically different from what we have, or there was a difference of opinion. Okay, so no.
And anytime there was like a discussion, it was like, oh, we're gonna have to bring this before the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't, we never changed anything that actually required thought.
So what you saying
We
is,
only changed what was required by law or, there was some like semantics or like had to insert a different district word
Okay,
instead. I
okay.
mean, it was,
so I guess the follow, great, good, and maybe I'll wade through I don't think I'm going to wade through the red line, therefore. Maybe does that therefore trigger if there were a bunch of things that could potentially have been changed but were not because we didn't want to make decisions on behalf of the board, does that guide okay, now that we've got the whole thing, here are our first 5 things we should do?
yes.
Yeah, we
Okay,
have
great.
that.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
We have
Yes,
that, yeah.
yes.
Great.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the other thing I would say at this point is the first time when we get a policy to look at it, I think we've tended to do this really super close reading of it, which is important. You do want to read that. And yet I also feel like I've really developed this understanding that the policy manual is really a tool, this is my understanding of it, is a tool to keep us all on track to be meeting our legal obligations for the policies that are required by law, and then to also make, and also to reflect policies that represent things that we are legally required to do. And that to go, I mean, others may disagree with this, to go too far down the line and begin to do a lot of wordsmithing with it, to make the language more to our liking in some situations could take us down the road to the perfect in the sacrifice of the good. And so I think, I think so. So I feel like the longer we've done this, the more pragmatic approach I've taken to reviewing the policies and thinking about how to do this. And because I think the most important thing is reflected in our commitment to continually audit and develop a process that we've kind of had to figure out, like, because we haven't done this in a while, to make sure that our policy manual is up to date and available to the public. So anyway, it'll be great for us to begin to have some of these conversations about policies, but we do have this list of things we want to come back and revisit. Absolutely.
Great.
But we can make everything available. And then at some end of a meeting, I can boringly describe to you what it all, like how to decipher all of it, because it's not completely transparent.
Awesome.
I
Thank you.
think. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sounds great. Okay, Westchester Putnam School Board Association update. Did anyone else go to the Managing the New Landscape webinar that they had last week?
No.
I wouldn't have seen you because it was a webinar, but what I really appreciated about it was this commitment to having a conversation about how we're all getting through COVID and how we're getting through the crisis and what's good about it. Like, what are the silver linings that we want to keep doing? And what are the things we want to definitely stop doing? And so Dr. Valerie Henning-Piedmont from Hastings-on-Hudson did a presentation about teaching about racism, which I thought was really relevant. Dr. Jeff Gorman, who's the Assistant Superintendent of Mount Vernon, did a presentation on blended learning. And it was really interesting to hear him talk because he is just loving this whole digital virtual world. And he's like, I've been trying to get our school district to do more virtual learning forever, and now we all have to do it, and it's going great, and I love it. And this is the wave of the future. Like, he's totally grooving on it, which, I don't know that I completely agree with him, but it's nice to have that kind of positive spin on what we're all experiencing. And then Dr. Elliot Cohen, who's the Director of Psychology at Scarsdale, gave a presentation on the status of mental health. And so I think it's impressive that Scarsdale has a Director of Psychology, but it's also very impressive to hear him speak. And John, you might might be interesting for you to look him up and look at what he's doing, because he is talking about assessing mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, it was interesting, and I thank Westchester Putnam for continuing to help us move forward. Okay. Any board reflections? Yes.
I wanted to thank Christine for talking again about the letters that the elementary school wrote to the seniors. You know, we've heard, I was just so touched by the district letter, just in a lot of ways. But I thought it was just really so nice. Like, we hear how isolation is a problem for lots of people. It's particularly concerning for our seniors. And I just think that's such a great project, and it's just lovely. And thanks for sharing it.
I want to thank Ms. Sniffen and the high school for doing the high school orientation. Oh my God, I cannot believe we're here. I don't know how that happened, but it was well done for a Zoom presentation, and I was really interested, because I didn't realize, or I hadn't thought that about the people who were really considering that, like, they're in the market for, am I going to send my kids to Haldane? And that came through as you're considering. We'd normally do a walkthrough. Maybe we'll think about a way to do that. And so that was reminding me that it's not just you go straight through. There are other populations we need to be cognizant of. So that was really good. And then also just a bunch of things I didn't know about, like in terms of course options and digital learning, Mandarin Chinese or whatever. So fantastic. Thank you very much. Looking forward to it. Jesus. Anyways.
Dr. Benante, any final thoughts?
No further thoughts. I wish everyone a happy holiday.
Can I ask one question? National Honor Society induction is on Thursday. If it snows, will it still be virtual? No. It will be postponed.
We're going to reschedule it, correct, Julia?
You should actually have an email in your inbox from Ms. Bernisi, if not now, by tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I think she sent it tonight. I think I saw that in there a moment ago. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking, Margaret.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing Dr. Benante's mid-year review.
And second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We are not coming back. Thank you.